Fog clung to the Thames like a mourner's veil. Inside the Crimson Club, London's most exclusive gambling den, crystal chandeliers bled scarlet light across roulette wheels and cigar smoke. At precisely 11:11 p.m., the croupier's cry froze every tongue. No more bets. Chapter 1. The Crimson Circle. Fog pressed against the tall windows of the Crimson Club like the breath of a dying man. Outside, the Thames coiled black and silent beneath Westminster Bridge. Inside, the air was thick with the perfume of Turkish cigarettes, beeswax polish, and the sharper tang of human dread. The club occupied the top 3 floors of a Georgian townhouse that had once belonged to a duke who lost everything at Faro in 1789. The walls were panelled in scarlet silk damask, the colour of arterial blood when it first meets oxygen. Crystal chandeliers, each droplet cut to refract light into 1,000 tiny knives, hung from ceilings painted with scenes from the Inferno. Roulette wheels clicked like the jaws of mechanical beasts. Cards whispered across green bays. And everywhere, the masks, domino cloaks in cardinal red, faces hidden behind porcelain or velvet, eyes glittering through slits like predators in the undergrowth. At precisely 11:11 p.m., the croupier at Tableau d'Or, a gaunt man with a voice like dry leaves, lifted his rake and declared, "Messieurs, mesdames, les jeux sont faits, rien ne va plus." The wheel spun, the ivory ball danced, and then a scream. Not the theatrical gasp of a losing gambler, but the raw animal sound of a throat discovering it has been opened to the world. The wheel slowed, the ball clattered into the red 27, and beneath the central chandelier, Sir Reginald Strathmore lay on his back, evening shoes pointed toward the ceiling, like a child playing dead. His throat was a second mouth, smiling crimson from ear to ear. A single white camellia, impossible in December, was pinned to his lapel with a diamond stud that had once belonged to Marie Antoinette. The flower's petals were dewed with blood, as though it had been plucked from the wound itself. The room did not erupt into chaos. It froze. 50 masked faces turned as one. The orchestra, hidden behind a gilded screen, let the final note of a Strauss waltz die into silence. Even the roulette wheel seemed to hesitate before clicking into its final rest. Into this tableau stepped a small man in patterned leather shoes and a cape lined with bottle green silk. His moustache was waxed to rapier points. His eyes, green as absinthe held to candlelight, surveyed the scene with the calm of a surgeon entering an operating theatre already prepared. "Mon Dieu," murmured Hercule Poirot. "What a very theatrical murder." Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, florid, flustered, and already sweating through his dinner jacket, pushed through the ring of onlookers. "Poirot, thank God!" The doors were locked at 11. No one in or out. The killer's here. Poirot did not reply immediately. He knelt beside the body, with the reverence of a priest at an altar. His gloved fingers, kid leather immaculate, hovered over the camellia without touching it. "Camellia japonica," he said softly, "the flower of perfect love and perfect revenge." He tilted his head. "The stem is freshly cut. See the sap, still viscous. This flower was placed after death, within the last 5 minutes." A woman's voice, brittle as spun sugar, cut through the hush. "He was alive at 11:05. I danced with him, Lavinia Strathmore, widow now, though the word had not yet settled on her shoulders, stood at the edge of the circle. Her gown was black lace over crimson satin, the colours of mourning and sin. Pearls trembled at her throat like captive tears. Her eyes were dry. Poirot rose. "Madame Strathmore, you will forgive the intrusion, but you are now the most important person in this room." He gestured to the 4 figures who had instinctively formed a semicircle around the body, as though guarding it, Or themselves. Présentez-vous, if you please. The little grey cells function best with order. The first to step forward was a tall man in dress uniform, scarlet tunic heavy with medals. His monocle flashed like a signal lamp. Colonel Archibald Arbuthnot, late of the 11th Hussar. Mesopotamia, 18. I was acquainted with Sir Reginald. Acquainted, Poirot repeated, savouring the word. A term that covers a multitude of sins. Next, a thinner man in evening dress, smelling faintly of carbolic and ether. His hands trembled as he adjusted wire-rimmed spectacles. Dr. Felix Harrow, club physician. I pronounced him. Well, you see the result. Poirot's gaze flicked to the doctor's cuffs. A smear of blood still wet. You examined the body. I checked for a pulse. There was none. The final figure was a woman in a gown of liquid scarlet, a camellia tucked behind one ear like a dare. Her accent was Parisian, her smile a blade. Madame Valois, I sing here on Thursdays. Sir Reginald was a patron. Poirot's moustache twitched. Patron, another word with many meanings. Japp cleared his throat. The room was locked from the inside at 11, bolts top and bottom. Windows barred, decorative, but solid iron. The only key is held by the manager, Mr. Grigson, who was in the lobby the entire time. 50 witnesses. Poirot circled the body slowly, his shoes making no sound on the parquet. 50 witnesses, oui. And yet no one saw the knife. Curious. He stopped at the roulette table, 10 feet from the corpse. A single drop of blood, dried to rust, marred the green felt. This blood is older. Hours, perhaps. Arterial spray does not travel 10 feet. No. This drop was placed. He produced a magnifying glass from his pocket, small, pearl-handled, deadly in its precision. Regardez. The drop contains fibres, crimson wool, but not from any cloak in this room. He plucked a thread from Madame Valois' scarf, silk, from the colonel's tunic, broadcloth, dyed, not woven, from a false beard, perhaps, a disguise, Colonel Arbuthnot's, monocle dropped on its ribbon. See here, Poirot. Patience, Colonel. The little grey cells are spinning. Poirot returned to the body. He lifted Sir Reginald's left hand. Beneath the starched cuff, a faint red circle was tattooed on the wrist, perfectly round, the width of a sixpence. Tiens, a mark, a brand, the Crimson Circle, perhaps. Lavinia Strathmore swayed. He received a note tonight, delivered by a page in crimson livery. The Crimson Circle closes at 11. I thought it a joke. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A society? A threat? Or an invitation to die? He turned to Japp. The note. Where is it? Burned. In the fireplace yonder. Only ash remains. Naturellement. Poirot approached the fireplace. The ashes were still warm. With tweezers, he extracted a fragment of vellum, thick, expensive, watermarked with a camellia. The stationery of the club. But the ink, he sniffed. Sanguine, blood-based, medieval. Dr. Harrow paled. The camellia, its stem, could it be poisoned? Poirot examined the flower under his glass. No, the prick would be too shallow, but the symbolism. He crushed a petal between his fingers. The scent was cloying, almost funereal. Camellia japonica in winter, grown in a hothouse, expensive, personal. He stood, brushing imaginary dust from his trousers. Mesdames et messieurs, we have a murder most intimate. The killer knew Sir Reginald's habits, his debts, his secrets, and they wished him to die publicly, surrounded by his peers. A warning, perhaps, or a celebration. Madame Valois laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. You think one of us, I think, Poirot interrupted, that the murderer is wearing the same mask as the rest of you, and they are watching us now. He gestured to the balcony that ringed the room. Shadows moved behind the balustrade. A figure in crimson domino leaned over, gloved hand trailing a second camellia. It fell, slowly, deliberately, spinning through the chandeliers, light like a drop of blood in water. It landed at Poirot's feet with a soft, wet thud. The flower was soaked in blood. Fresh. Poirot picked it up by the stem. Pinned to the petals was a card. Thick vellum, crimson ink. The message was simple. The orchestra screen creaked. Behind it, something moved. A shadow detached itself from the wall and vanished through a service door. Poirot's voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the room. Minuit approche. The game, mes amis, has only just begun. He tucked the camellia into his buttonhole, beside his own white pocket square. The contrast was striking. Innocence and guilt side by side. Japp barked orders. Constables flooded the room, herding guests into corners, checking masks. But Poirot was already moving, toward the service door, cane tapping a measured rhythm on the parquet. Chapter 2. The Locked Room Paradox. The service door opened onto a narrow corridor lit by a single gas sconce, its flame guttering in a draught that smelled of coal dust and old velvet. Hercule Poirot paused on the threshold, cane poised like a conductor's baton. Behind him, Inspector Japp's constables fanned out, boots clacking on the uncarpeted floorboards. The Crimson Club's public glamour ended here. The walls were bare brick, the ceiling low enough to brush the taller policemen's helmets. A brass plaque read, "Staff only, no admittance." Poirot's nostrils flared. Attendez, the air, sulphur, a match struck recently. He knelt, gloved fingers brushing the floor. A smear of crimson, blood still tacky, trailed toward a dumbwaiter set into the wall. The rope was frayed, the wooden box large enough to hold a man curled fetal. Japp barked, "Grigson, the manager, where is he?" A tremulous voice answered from the shadows. Mr. Grigson, thin, balding, waistcoat buttons straining, emerged clutching a ring of keys that jangled like a leper's bell. "Here, Inspector. I locked the doors myself at 11, bolts top and bottom. The only key to this corridor is mine." He held it up, a heavy iron thing, medieval in its crudity. Poirot took the key, weighed it in his palm. Lord, and yet he inserted it into the lock. It turned with a soft snick. Parfait. No forcing, but the blood trail, regardez. It begins inside the salon and ends here. He pointed to the dumbwaiter. The smear stopped at the box's lower edge, as though something had been dragged into it. A constable yanked the rope. The dumbwaiter ascended with a groan, empty. But the interior walls were streaked with fresh blood, and a single white camellia petal clung to the corner like a moth. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. The murderer did not leave the room. They descended. Japp's face purpled. "The cellar? But that's sealed, bricked up since the war, précisément." Poirot's eyes gleamed. A sealed room within a sealed room. The paradox deepens. They returned to the salon. The body of Sir Reginald Strathmore still lay beneath the chandelier, now covered by a crimson tablecloth at Poirot's insistence. Respect, he had said, even for the dead who deceive us. The roulette table, 10 feet from the corpse, drew him again. The dried blood drop fascinated him. He scraped it with a silver fruit knife, depositing the flake into a small glass vial. Sanguin ancien, hours old, and these fibres. He held them to the light. Laine teinte. Dyed wool, yes, but the dye is cochineal, from beetles, expensive, used in military uniforms or theatrical costumes. Colonel Arbuthnot, who had been watching with the rigid stillness of a man on parade, shifted his weight. "See here, Poirot. This is all very clever, but the doors were locked. 50 witnesses. The blade? Ah, oui, the blade." Poirot's gaze lifted to the chandelier. Its central prism, A teardrop of rock crystal the size of a pigeon's egg was missing. In its place, something glinted. A razor blade, its edge dark with blood, tied to a length of crimson silk thread. The thread disappeared into the chandelier's armature, vanishing among the crystals. Japp gaped. "Good Lord, it's above us. Exactement." Poirot clapped his hands once, sharply. A pendulum. The murderer needed time, minutes, not seconds. They rigged the blade to swing down at 11:11 precisely. A weight, a thread, a counterbalance, et voilà, death from the sky. He climbed onto a chair, despite Japp's protest, and examined the mechanism. The silk thread was knotted around a small brass cog, part of the chandelier's winch system used to lower it for cleaning. Ingénieux, the croupier's cry, rien ne va plus, was the signal. The wheel stops, the blade drops, but, he frowned, the angle is wrong. The throat wound is horizontal, not vertical. The blade would have struck the crown, not the neck. Dr. Felix Harrow, who had been silent since his earlier examination, cleared his throat. Arterial spray. The drop on the table, 10 feet away. Impossible. Blood doesn't travel that far, not even under pressure. Poirot's smile was thin, unless it was carried. He produced a small tin of talcum powder from his pocket, poudre de riz, Paris, and puffed it across the table. A faint footprint appeared. A man's shoe, size 9, but the tread was ridged like a workman's boot. The killer stood here, holding the blade. They slashed, then threw the blood, perhaps with a syringe. The drop on the table is a distraction. Madame Valois, who had been watching from the bar with a glass of absinthe untouched in her hand, laughed softly. "You invent fairy tales, monsieur. Next you'll say the chandelier flew." Poirot bowed. "No, madame, but it swung." He pointed to the ceiling rose. A faint scratch marred the gilt, fresh. The murderer climbed the balcony, loosened the winch, and let the chandelier drop a foot. Enough for the blade to reach the victim's height. Then, snap, the thread cuts, the blade falls, the chandelier rises again. The scratch? From the counterweight. Lavinia Strathmore swayed, clutching a chair for support. Reginald's safe. In his office. He kept documents. The combination is 11-11-11. The time he died, Poirot finished gently. "Oui, a message perhaps." Japp dispatched 2 constables to the office. They returned minutes later with a small steel safe, its dial still set to 11-11-11. Inside, a ledger bound in crimson leather, the title embossed in gold, The Crimson Circle. And beneath it, a photograph, Poirot himself, taken outside the club that very evening, a red circle drawn around his face in blood-red ink. Poirot's composure flickered for the first time. "Moi? I have never gambled. I do not even play bridge." Japp muttered, "Someone's framing you, old friend." Poirot flipped through the ledger. 5 names, each with a camellia symbol. The final entry was in a different hand, shaky, desperate, a single word, traitor. Poirot closed the ledger. "Mes amis, this is not a murder, it is a manifesto." He turned to the dumbwaiter. The blood trail had been smeared deliberately. Someone had tried to erase it with a rag. The rag lay discarded in the corner. Crimson wool, cochineal dyed, monogrammed, with a tiny V. Madame Valois' hand flew to her throat. "My scarf! It was here earlier, planted," Poirot said, "like the blood drop, like the photograph." He produced a second thread from his pocket. This one from Colonel Arbuthnot's swagger stick, where the ferrule met the ebony. "Vous, Colonel. You carry a sword stick, the blade inside. Could it be a razor?" Arbuthnot's face went the color of old parchment. "This is outrageous." The lights flickered. A collective gasp rose as the chandelier swayed violently. Though no wind stirred the air, the razor blade, still tied to its thread, glinted as it swung. Then, with a soft ping, the thread snapped. The blade fell, embedding itself in the parquet inches from Poirot's shoe. Silence. Poirot picked it up. The handle was wrapped in crimson silk, monogrammed with a tiny A. Arbuthnot lunged, monocle flying. Japp's men tackled him, but not before he'd torn the ledger from Poirot's hands. Pages scattered like crimson leaves. In the chaos, Dr. Harrow slipped toward the service door. Poirot's voice cut through the din. "Doctor! The camellia in your pocket! Montrez-le!" Harrow froze. Slowly, he withdrew a flower, its petals injected with a clear liquid that beaded like sweat. "Belladonna," he whispered. "Paralytic. One prick." Poirot seized his wrist. The doctor's cuff rode up, revealing a red circle tattoo, identical to Sir Reginald's. "You knew the dosage. You grew the camellias. In the club's hothouse, non?" Harrow's eyes rolled back. He collapsed, frothing at the mouth. Poison or fear? Japp knelt beside him. "He's alive, but his pulse, rapide. Atropine counteracts belladonna. Fetch a stomach pump." Poirot's gaze swept the room. The murderer plays a deeper game. The locked room, the pendulum, the ledger, all distractions. The true crime is identity. He pointed to the photograph of himself. This was taken tonight. Someone watched me arrive. Someone knew I would come. The constables hauled Arbuthnot to his feet. The colonel's face was a mask of rage, but his eyes, Poirot noted, were calm. Too calm. "Colonel," Poirot said softly, "your swagger stick. May I?" Arbuthnot hesitated, then unscrewed the ferrule. Inside, not a blade, but a rolled sheet of vellum. Poirot unrolled it. A map of the club, with an X over the wine cellar. And in the corner, a single camellia pressed flat, its petals stained with blood that spelled a word, "Descend." The lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room. A woman screamed, "Lavinia!" Glass shattered. When the emergency lamps flared, Dr. Harrow was gone. The dumbwaiter rope hung limp, the box descending into the bowels of the club with a soft, rhythmic thump, thump, thump. Poirot snatched a lantern from a constable and leapt into the shaft, sliding down the rope with the agility of a man half his age. The box stopped at the cellar level. The doors were ajar. He stepped into a cavernous space lit by a single crimson bulb. Crates lined the walls. Camellia japonica, hundreds of them, their hothouse scent, cloying. In the centre, a surgical table stained with old blood. And on it, Dr. Harrow, throat cut ear to ear, a camellia pinned to his lapel with the same diamond stud that had adorned Sir Reginald's corpse. Poirot's breath frosted in the chill. Mon Dieu, the second petal falls. Above, Japp's voice echoed down the shaft. "Poirot! The suspects! They've confessed! All of them! Said you'd never escape." Poirot looked at Harrow's body. The wound was fresh, the blood still flowing. But the doctor's eyes, wide staring, held no surprise, only relief. He touched the camellia. Beneath it, a note in Harrow's spidery hand. The circle has no centre, only masks. Poirot folded the note into his pocket. Alors, the paradox is complete. The locked room was never locked. The murderer was never in it. He climbed back up the rope, emerging into the salon where the suspects stood in a semicircle, faces pale but composed. Arbuthnot's swagger stick was reassembled. Valois' scarf was back around her neck. Lavinia's pearls gleamed. Poirot smiled, a small, terrible smile. "Mesdames et messieurs, you have all confessed. Parfait. Now we begin the true interrogation." He turned to the chandelier. The razor blade was gone. In its place, a single white camellia spun slowly on its thread, dripping blood that was not Dr. Harrow's. Chapter 3. The Ledger of the Dead. The Crimson Club's wine cellar smelled of damp stone, cork rot, and something sweeter. Hothouse camellias forced into bloom under gaslight. A single crimson bulb swung from a frayed cord, painting the crates in arterial pulses. Dr. Felix Harrow lay on the surgical table like a specimen awaiting dissection. His throat a dark grin beneath the diamond-studded camellia. The blood had pooled, thick and glossy, then begun to congeal into a map of its own making, tendrils reaching toward the drain as though the floor itself were drinking. Hercule Poirot stood motionless, lantern raised. The light caught the dust motes drifting like ash. His shadow loomed across the ceiling, a giant with a perfectly waxed moustache. Inspector Japp's voice still echoed from the dumbwaiter shaft above. All of them confessed. A phrase that rang hollow now, like a cracked bell. Poirot knelt beside the body. The wound was identical to Sir Reginald's. One clean slash, left to right, severing carotid and jugular with surgical precision. The diamond stud, Marie Antoinette's according to club legend, glinted mockingly. Précisément, Poirot murmured. The same hand, the same signature. He lifted Harrow's left wrist. Beneath the cuff, the red circle tattoo still raw, as though inked within the hour. He produced his pearl-handled magnifying glass. The tattoo was not ink, but scarification, skin raised in a perfect ring, the edges cauterized. Mon Dieu! A brand heated metal pressed to flesh. The pain would be exquisite. He sniffed the wound, cautery paste, carbolic and silver nitrate. Our killer is a doctor, or was trained by one. A soft scrape came from the far corner. Poirot swung the lantern. Crates stamped Camellia japonica, property of the Crimson Club, were stacked floor to ceiling. One crate had been pried open, white petals spilled like snow. He approached. Inside, not flowers, but glass ampoules, hundreds of them, each filled with clear liquid and stoppered with wax. A label in Harrow's handwriting, Atropa Belladonna, 1000. Poirot lifted one ampoule to the light. Belladonna, the beautiful lady. Paralytic in small doses, lethal in large. One prick of a camellia stem. He crushed a petal from the table. The underside was pierced with a hypodermic needle, invisible to the naked eye. Ingenieux. The flower is the weapon, the hothouse, the laboratory. He turned back to the body. Harrow's right hand clutched a crumpled note. The circle has no centre, only masks. The paper was vellum, watermarked with the club's camellia crest. Poirot unfolded it fully. On the reverse, a list in the same spidery hand. Poirot's breath fogged the glass. Moi, the final mask. He tucked the note into his waistcoat, beside the first camellia, the one that had fallen at his feet in the salon. Footsteps clattered down the spiral staircase. Japp appeared, lantern swinging, followed by 2 constables and the 4 suspects. Lavinia Strathmore, Colonel Arbuthnot, Madame Valois, and, impossibly, Sir Reginald Strathmore, bound and gagged, eyes wild above a strip of crimson silk. Japp panted. Found him in the prop room behind the orchestra, drugged. The corpse upstairs is a double, wax mask, surgical stitches. The real Sir Reginald's been here since 10 o'clock. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Alors, the locked room was never locked. The murder was a performance. He approached the bound man. Sir Reginald's wrists bore rope burns. His evening clothes were torn, but the red circle tattoo on his wrist was old, faded, the skin puckered. Monsieur, you are the original. The ledger, montrez-le. Japp produced the crimson ledger, now missing several pages. Poirot flipped to the final entry. The shaky traitor was written in Sir Reginald's hand, verified by a sample from his office safe. He wrote this before he was taken, a warning. Sir Reginald nodded frantically. Poirot removed the gag. The baronet's voice was hoarse, unused. They took my face. Harrow! He sculpted it. Wax over latex. Said it was for a masquerade. Then the needle, belladonna. I woke up here. Poirot turned to the suspects. Mesdames et messieurs, you confessed, all of you. A clever lie, no? To buy time. He gestured to the crates. The Crimson Circle is not a gambling ring. It is a factory. Faces stolen, fortunes transferred, identities erased. Sir Reginald was the first, Dr. Harrow the architect. But who is the mastermind? Colonel Arbuthnot's monocle flashed. This is preposterous. I've never— Poirot interrupted, producing the map from Arbuthnot's swagger stick. You drew this, Colonel. The X over the wine cellar. You knew where the real Sir Reginald was hidden. He pointed to the surgical table, and you killed Harrow to silence him. Arbuthnot lunged, but the constables restrained him. Madame Valois laughed, a low, throaty sound. Mon petit detective, you see phantoms. I was singing at 11, 50 witnesses. Oui, Poirot said. But your voice was recorded. A gramophone in the orchestra pit. You were here, injecting the camellias. He held up an ampule. Your fingerprints, madame, on the wax stopper. Valois' smile faltered. Lavinia Strathmore swayed, clutching her pearls. Reginald, my husband. They said he was ruined, that the club would take everything. I agreed to lure him here. Poirot's voice softened. Madame, you were the bait, but not the killer. He turned to the crates. The circle required 5 faces. 4 are accounted for. The 5th, he tapped the ledger. H. Poirot. They needed a detective to validate the performance, to chase shadows while the real crime occurred elsewhere. He approached a crate marked H. Poirot, return to sender. The lid was nailed shut. With Japp's assistance, he pried it open. Inside, a wax mask of his own face, perfect down to the curl of the moustache. The eyes were glass, staring. Beneath it, a bundle of documents, forged passports, bank transfers, all in Poirot's name. 500,000 pulse, routed to a Swiss account. Japp whistled. They were going to become you. Poirot's fingers brushed the mask. No, they already have. He lifted the mask. Beneath it, a second note. The 3rd petal falls at 1 a.m. Find the heart of the maze. A crude map was sketched on the back, the club's layout, with a spiral descending beneath the wine cellar. Sir Reginald whispered, There's a door, behind the brandy casks, leads to the old smugglers' tunnels, to the Thames. Poirot folded the map. Alors, the paradox resolves. The locked room was a stage. The murderer never left. They descended. He turned to the suspects. One of you knows the way. The crimson bulb flickered. A low hum filled the cellar, machinery deep below. The surgical table shuddered. Harrow's body slid sideways, revealing a trapdoor beneath. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the stone. Japp drew his revolver. What the devil? Poirot raised a hand. Patience, the 3rd act begins. He knelt, prying at the trapdoor. It opened with a groan, revealing a spiral staircase of rusted iron, descending into darkness. The air that rose was warm, sulphurous, laced with the scent of camellias and hot wax. He lit a match. The walls were painted with camellias, hundreds of them, each with a face in the centre. Sir Reginald, Arbuthnot, Valois, Harrow, and Poirot. Dozens of Poirots, eyes scratched out. Mon Dieu, Poirot breathed. A gallery of the erased. Footsteps echoed below, heavy, deliberate. A figure ascended, cloaked in crimson, face hidden by a porcelain mask painted with Poirot's own features. The mask was cracked, one eye missing. In the figure's hand, a camellia, dripping blood. The figure spoke, voice muffled but unmistakably Poirot's own. Bien joué, mon frère. You have found the heart, but the circle has no end. The crimson bulb exploded. Darkness swallowed the cellar. Gunshots, screams. When the emergency lamps flared, The figure was gone. The trapdoor hung open. The camellia lay on the surgical table, its petals arranged to spell a single word: descend. Poirot picked it up. The blood was warm, fresh, and beneath the flower, a key, brass, ornate, engraved with a tiny C. He turned to Japp. Minuit et demi, midnight. The third petal falls in 30 minutes. We go down. Sir Reginald grabbed his arm. You can't. They'll take your face. Poirot's smile was terrible. Monsieur, they already have. Now we take it back. He stepped onto the spiral staircase. The iron rang beneath his patent leather shoes. Behind him, the suspects followed, bound, guarded, but alive. The ledger was clutched in Japp's hand. The wax mask of Poirot's face stared up from the crate, eyes glittering in the lantern light. Chapter 4. The Masquerade of Motives. The spiral staircase descended in a tightening coil, each iron step slick with condensation and the ghosts of centuries. The air grew warmer, heavier, saturated with the breath of the Thames above, and the perfume of camellias below. Hercule Poirot led the procession, lantern raised like a torch in a catacomb. Behind him, Inspector Japp, revolver drawn, 2 constables with rifles, and the 4 suspects, Lavinia Strathmore, Colonel Arbuthnot, Madame Valois, and the real Sir Reginald, bound at the wrists with crimson silk cords that had once been table runners. Their footsteps echoed in staggered rhythm, clank, clank, shuffle, shuffle, clank, clank. The walls were no longer brick but river stone, weeping moisture that ran in rivulets to join a shallow stream at their feet. Every 10 steps, a camellia was painted in blood-red pigment, its petals curling inward to frame a face. Some were scratched out. Others stared with glass eyes pressed into the mortar. The gallery of the erased. At the bottom, the staircase opened into a cavernous chamber, once a smuggler's vault, now a theatre of horrors. The ceiling arched 20 feet high, braced with oak beams black with age. Crimson bulbs hung from chains, swaying like pendulums. In the centre, a roulette wheel the size of a cartwheel, its numbers painted in gold. Around it, 5 chairs, each occupied by a wax figure wearing the suspects' faces. The figures were dressed in the victim's clothes: Sir Reginald's tailcoat, Harrow's blood-stained waistcoat, even Poirot's bottle-green cape. Their throats were slashed, camellias pinned to the wounds with diamond studs. Poirot stopped. Mon Dieu, the Crimson Circle's inner sanctum. Japp's lantern swept the room. No exits. We're trapped. Non. Poirot pointed to the roulette wheel. Its axle disappeared into the floor. The wheel is the door. He approached the wax figure of himself. The mask was perfect, down to the curl of the moustache, but the eyes were wrong. Too blue. Lifted the figure's hand. Beneath the glove, the red circle tattoo, fresh. Lavinia Strathmore gasped. That's my husband's ring. On the wax finger, Sir Reginald's signet, engraved with the family crest. Sir Reginald, bound beside her, shook his head violently. I'm wearing my ring. Poirot examined both. Identical, forged. The circle duplicates everything. Faces, voices, signatures. He turned the roulette wheel. It spun silently, then clicked into place. A section of the floor sank, revealing a circular staircase descending further. Le cœur du labyrinthe. They descended. The air was now hot. Steam hissed from pipes running along the walls. The chamber below was a mirror maze. Panels of polished silver, reflecting infinite Poirots, infinite suspects, infinite camellias. The floor was a chessboard of black and white marble. At the centre, a pedestal holding a single object, a gramophone, its horn painted crimson. Madame Valois whispered my voice. Poirot cranked the handle. A recording crackled to life, her own sultry rendition of La Vie en Rose, but the lyrics were altered. Quand il me prend dans ses bras, il me parle tout bas. Je vois la mort en rose. The mirrors rippled. The wax figures from above were here too, arranged in a circle, heads bowed. One figure lifted its face. Dr. Harrow, wax melting in the heat, revealing a hollow shell. Colonel Arbuthnot snarled, "This is devilry!" "Non," Poirot said, "science. Latex, wax, surgical adhesive. The circle steals a man's face in life, wears it in death." He approached a mirror. His reflection smiled, but he did not. The reflection raised a camellia. Poirot's hand was empty. Japp fired at the mirror. The bullet ricocheted, embedding in the ceiling. The reflection laughed. Poirot's laugh. "Illusion," Poirot said calmly. "Two-way glass. The maze is watched." He tapped the chessboard with his cane. A tile depressed. The mirrors slid aside, revealing 5 doors, each marked with a suspect's initial, LAVRP. Poirot opened the door marked P. Inside, a small room lined with photographs, hundreds of them. Poirot at the club entrance, Poirot in his flat, Poirot sleeping. Each photo circled in red. On a table, a surgical kit, scalpels gleaming, and a mask, his face, but the eyes were holes. Beneath it, a note, "Wear me at 1 a.m. The tide rises." He closed the door. "Mes amis, the motives are clear." He gathered them in the chessboard centre. The gramophone spun silently now. Lavinia Strathmore. "Your husband's debts were $50,000. The club offered to erase them if you lured him here. You agreed, but you did not know they would take his face." Lavinia's pearls clicked as she trembled. "I thought it was a game, a masquerade. Colonel Arbuthnot, Mesopotamia, 1918. You shot prisoners. Sir Reginald had proof, photographs. He blackmailed you. You agreed to silence him, but the circle silenced you first. Your face is already in their gallery." Arbuthnot's monocle dropped. I woke up in a crate. They said it was a prank. Madame Valois. Espionage, 1918. You sold secrets to the Germans. Sir Reginald was your handler. He threatened exposure. You provided the voice, the gramophone recordings to create alibis. Valois' crimson lips curled. "C'est la guerre, survival. Sir Reginald, you founded the Circle. A society of debtors, blackmailers, spies. But you tried to leave. They took your face as punishment." Sir Reginald's voice was a croak. "I wanted out. They said no one leaves." Poirot turned to the final door, unmarked and moi. They needed a detective to chase shadows, to make the performance real. He opened the door. Inside, a flooded tunnel, the Thames lapping at the threshold. A boat waited, small black oars shipped. On the seat, a camellia and a pocket watch stopped at 1 a.m. The water rose, 1 inch, 2 inches. Japp shouted, "The tide! We have minutes!" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Précisément." The 4th petal falls with the flood. He examined the chessboard. One tile was loose. Beneath it a lever. He pulled it. The mirrors locked into place, forming a corridor to the boat. But the suspects hesitated. Arbuthnot lunged at Poirot, silk cords snapping. "You'll drown us all!" Japp fired a warning shot. The bullet struck a mirror. Shards rained. In the chaos, Valois slipped free, diving into the water. She surfaced near the boat, camellia clenched in her teeth. Poirot shouted, "Madame, the current, too late!" The tunnel lights flared. A gate slammed shut behind the boat. Valois was gone. The water was at their knees now. Lavinia screamed. Sir Reginald collapsed. Arbuthnot stood frozen, monocle fogged. Poirot grabbed the gramophone horn. "Vite! The mirrors, push!" Together they shoved the panels. One gave way, revealing a maintenance ladder. They climbed, water rising, camellias floating like lilies in a macabre garden. At the top, The wine cellar, the trapdoor above was bolted. Jap pounded. Open up! A voice, Poirot's own, answered from above. Non, mon frère! The masquerade continues. The bolt slid back. The trapdoor opened. A figure in Poirot's cape stood silhouetted, face hidden by a porcelain mask. In its hand, a camellia dripping. The figure tossed the flower. It landed in the water, petals spreading. The watch, 1 a.m. chimed once. The figure spoke. The fourth petal falls. Find me in the ballroom. Or London drowns. It vanished. The ladder trembled. The water roared below. Poirot looked at the suspects. Soaked, shivering, masks of wax and flesh indistinguishable. Mes amis, the killer wears my face, and they have a bomb. He climbed out first. The wine cellar was empty. Harrow's body was gone, the surgical table clean. Only the camellia remained, floating in a pool of water that spelled a single word in crimson petals. Ascend, Chapter 5, The Man Without a Face. Water lapped at the parquet, ankle-deep and rising, carrying camellia petals that spun like white moths in the chandelier's dying light. The great mirrors, once a maze, now hung askew, reflecting fractured moons of crimson and gold. The orchestra pit was a black lake. Violins floated like broken swans. Every breath tasted of river mud and belladonna. Hercule Poirot stood on the conductor's podium, the only dry island left. His patent leather shoes were ruined, his trousers soaked to the knee, but the moustache remained defiant. Around him, the survivors formed a ragged circle. Inspector Japp, revolver dripping, Lavinia Strathmore, pearls floating at her throat like tiny nooses, Colonel Arbuthnot, monocle lost, eyes wild, Sir Reginald shivering in his bonds, and 2 constables, rifles raised against shadows. The masked figure, Poirot's own face in porcelain, had vanished through the balcony doors. The camellia it tossed still floated in the water, its petals spelling ascend. But ascend where? The grand staircase was a waterfall. Poirot's voice cut through the roar of the flood. Mes amis, the killer plays his finale. The bomb is here. The 5th petal falls at 1:15. He glanced at his pocket watch. 1:09. 6 minutes. Japp shouted over the water. The chandelier! He said the ballroom. Poirot's gaze lifted. The central chandelier swayed violently, though no wind stirred the air. Its crystals were dark now, refracting only the emergency lamp's sickly glow. A faint tick-tick-tick emanated from within, like a clock or a fuse. He waded into the flood, cane probing the floor. The water was at his shins, cold as a grave. Vite! The roulette wheel from the cellar, its axle connected to the winch. The bomb is inside the chandelier, lowered by the same mechanism that dropped the blade. Arbuthnot snarled, "You'll drown us all!" "No!" Poirot found a submerged lever beneath the conductor's podium. He pulled, a grinding clunk. The chandelier descended slowly, chains rattling, water cascading from its prisms. At its heart, a black iron sphere the size of a cannonball. Wires snaking to a pocket watch face. 1:12 and counting down. Lavinia screamed. Sir Reginald collapsed to his knees. The constables levelled rifles at the sphere, useless. Poirot climbed onto a floating table, reaching the chandelier as it hovered at chest height. "Belladonna," he muttered, sniffing the wires. Insulated with camellia oil, flammable. He produced his silver fruit knife, slicing the red wire. "No, green, no!" The watch ticked to 1:13. Japp yelled, "Poirot! The balcony!" The masked figure reappeared, now on the balcony rail. It raised a hand. The porcelain mask cracked, falling away in pieces. Beneath, nothing. A void of surgical gauze stained with old blood. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just a smooth, featureless plane where a face should be. The figure spoke, voice a hollow echo of Poirot's own. Le dernier masque, The final mask, you cannot stop the tide. It leapt. The figure landed in the water with a splash, vanishing beneath the surface. Bubbles rose. Then silence. 1:14. Poirot's knife hovered over the final wire, black. He hesitated. Mon Dieu! A paradox. Cut the wire. The bomb detonates. Do not cut. It detonates at 1:15. Arbuthnot lunged, grabbing Poirot's arm. You'll kill us! Japp tackled him. The colonel's head struck a floating chair, blood mixing with the water. Lavinia sobbed. Sir Reginald whispered, The ledger! Page 13! Poirot's eyes widened. He tore open the crimson ledger, still clutched by Japp, sodden but intact. Page 13, a diagram of the chandelier, wires labelled in Harrow's hand, black wire, Bart's detonator, red wire, Bart's delay, cut red at 1:14:14:30. The watch read 1:14:20. Poirot sliced the red wire. The ticking stopped. The sphere went dark. Silence, broken only by the water's lap. The chandelier hung inert, a dead star. The bomb was diffused, but the masked figure rose from the flood, featureless face dripping. It held a camellia, the fifth, its stem a fuse, already lit. The spark hissed toward the petals. The figure spoke, voice bubbling through gauze. The circle has no center, only masks. It hurled the camellia. The flower arced, spark trailing, landing at Poirot's feet. The fuse burned. 3 inches, too. Poirot kicked it. The camellia skittered across the water, spark dying in the flood. The petals sank. The figure laughed, a sound like tearing silk. It turned, wading toward the grand staircase. The water was at its waist now, but it moved with purpose. Japp fired. The bullet struck the figure's shoulder. Gauze tore, revealing wax. The figure did not flinch. It reached the staircase, climbing as the water rose. Poirot shouted, Arrêtez! The tide peaks at 2 out! The club will be under water! The figure paused on the landing. Exactly. London drowns with the circle. The masks float. The faces sink. It vanished into the balcony shadows. 1:15. The 5th petal had fallen and failed to ignite. Poirot turned to the survivors. Mes amis, the killer is wounded. The wax bleeds. We follow. They waded through the ballroom, water at their thighs. The grand staircase was a torrent, but the balcony doors hung open. Beyond, the club's private suites, bedrooms, dressing rooms, a hothouse conservatory where camellias grew year-round. The trail was clear, droplets of melted wax, pink as flesh, leading to the conservatory. The glass doors were ajar, steam billowing out. Inside, a jungle of camellias, white and red, their scent cloying. The temperature was tropical, condensation fogged the panes. In the centre, a surgical chair, restraints dangling. On it, the faceless figure, gauze peeled away. Beneath, scar tissue, a map of old burns and grafts. No features, just a blank canvas of pain. The figure spoke, voice raw. You want the man without a face. Here I am. Poirot approached, cane raised. Monsieur, you are the circle's masterpiece. A man erased in the war, rebuilt to erase others. The figure laughed. Mesopotamia, chlorine gas. My face melted like wax. The circle gave me a new one, yours. It gestured to a table. Masks of Poirot, Arbuthnot Valois, dozens, in various stages of completion. We steal identities, fortunes, lives. Sir Reginald was the first. You will be the last, Lavinia whispered. Who are you? The figure turned its void toward her. No one. That is the point. Japp raised his revolver. You're under arrest. The figure moved, faster than should be possible. It seized a scalpel from the table, slashing the constable's bonds. Sir Reginald stumbled free, grabbing a camellia stem, needle-tipped. He lunged at Poirot. Poirot sidestepped. The needle grazed his cheek, drawing blood. Belladonna burned. Sir Reginald's eyes were mad. They promised me my face back. The faceless figure laughed. He lied. The circle keeps what it takes. Arbuthnot, freed in the chaos, tackled Sir Reginald. The two men fell into the camellias' crushing blooms. Lavinia screamed, clutching Japp. Poirot staggered, vision blurring. Belladonna! He had seconds. He grabbed a mask, his own face, and pressed it to the faceless man's void. The wax adhered, surgical adhesive still tacky. The figure clawed at it, muffled screams. Poirot whispered, "You wanted my face, take it!" He shoved the figure into the surgical chair, strapping the restraints. The mask sealed over the void, eyes aligning with the holes. For a moment, the killer was Poirot, trapped in his own image. The belladonna surged. Poirot's knees buckled. Japp caught him. "Poirot! Atropine! Harrow's kit!" Japp rummaged, finding an ampule. He injected Poirot's arm. The burning eased. The faceless man, now wearing Poirot's face, thrashed. "You think this stops us? The circle is everywhere!" Poirot, vision clearing, approached. "Non, the circle ends tonight." He lifted the ledger's final page, torn from Arbuthnot's struggle. A list of names, banks, accounts, passwords. $500,000 donated to war orphans, the masks destroyed, the faces returned. He turned to the hothouse furnace, used to melt wax. He opened the grate, tossing in the masks. They melted, dripping like tears. The faceless man screamed as his borrowed face bubbled. The porcelain cracked, wax running. Beneath, the scar tissue, raw and weeping. Sir Reginald, pinned by Arbuthnot, sobbed, "My face! They took it!" Poirot knelt. "Monsieur, your face was never taken, only hidden. The double upstairs. Wax over your own skin. Harrow's final trick." He peeled the wax from the ballroom corpse, still floating in the flood. Beneath, Sir Reginald's face, pale but intact. The man had been drugged, masked, displayed as dead. The real killer, the faceless man, slumped in the chair. The war took everything. The circle gave purpose. Poirot's voice was soft. Purpose built on theft. Non. The water rose, now at the conservatory doors. The Thames roared outside. 1:30 a.m. The tide peaked. Japp shouted, "We have to get out!" Poirot looked at the faceless man. "You will come with us. Your testimony ends the circle." The man laughed. A hollow sound. Too late. He pressed a hidden button on the chair. The floor trembled. A boom from below. The wine cellar. The supports gave way. The conservatory. Tilted. Glass shattered. Camellias poured into the flood. Poirot grabbed Lavinia. Japp hauled Arbuthnot. The constables dragged Sir Reginald. The faceless man remained strapped, smiling his void. Water surged in. The furnace exploded. Steam and wax. The masks melted into the flood. Poirot's last glimpse. The faceless man sinking with the chair. Poirot's melted mask bubbling over his scars. They climbed the balcony railing as the ballroom collapsed. The chandelier crashed, bomb inert but chains whipping like serpents. At 1:45, they reached the roof. The Thames raged below, the club half submerged. Dawn was hours away. Poirot looked at the survivors. The man without a face is gone. The circle drowns. But in the water below, a single camellia floated, intact, white, unbloodied. Its petals opened to reveal a final note. The circle has no end. Chapter 6. The Mirror Maze. The roof of the Crimson Club was a tilted island in a black seas. The Thames had swallowed the lower floors. Only the attic gables and the glass cupola of the conservatory jutted above the flood like the ribs of a dying leviathan. Moonlight, thin and silver, cut through the fog and struck the water in shards. Camellia petals floated everywhere, white against the oil-slick surface, spelling nothing now, only drifting. Hercule Poirot stood at the parapet, cape plastered to his shoulders, The last camellia clutched in his gloved hand. The note inside the circle has no end was written in waterproof ink. The paper had not dissolved. Behind him, the survivors huddled beneath the eaves. Inspector Japp, reloading his Webley with shaking fingers. Lavinia Strathmore, gown shredded to ribbons, pearls lost. Colonel Arbuthnot, bareheaded, a livid bruise blooming across his temple. Sir Reginald, face uncovered at last, pale and blinking like a man reborn. The two constables, rifles slung, faces grey with cold. 1:47 a.m. The tide still rose. Somewhere below, the faceless man had sunk with his borrowed mask. Yet the camellia in Poirot's hand was dry. Impossible? Poirot turned the flower. The stem had been hollowed, a glass tube inserted. Inside, a tiny brass key and a rolled strip of nitrate film no longer than a fingernail. He held it to the moonlight. A single frame, a mirror maze, infinite reflections, and in the centre a crate stamped H. Poirot. Urgent. Japp rasped. Head's dead, Poirot. We saw him drown. No. Poirot's voice was soft steel. We saw a performance. The faceless man is the circle's masterpiece, alive because he has no face to drown. He pointed downstream. A police launch cut through the fog, searchlight sweeping. Scotland Yard comes. They will seal the embankment. We have 12 minutes to reach the crate. Arbuthnot snarled. You'll get us all killed! Lavinia's teeth chattered. The embankment tunnels. Smugglers used them. There's an iron ladder from the roof. She led them to a rusted maintenance hatch. It groaned open onto a vertical shaft. The ladder was slick with river slime, but it descended to a catwalk above the flood. They climbed single file. Clang, clang, clang. The sound swallowed by the roar of water. The catwalk ended at a service door marked Cellar Access. Danger! Poirot's skeleton key, taken from the faceless man's chair, fit the lock. Inside, the mirror maze, salvaged from the ballroom and reassembled in a cavernous warehouse beneath the embankment. The flood had not reached here. The air was dry, electric with ozone. Crimson bulbs flickered in sequence, creating the illusion of movement. Reflections multiplied. Poirot saw himself 1,000 times, each moustache twitching independently. Japp whispered, It's a trap, précisément. Poirot stepped forward. The floor was pressure-sensitive glass. Each footfall lit a tile. A path illuminated, black squares only, leading to the centre. Échecs, chess, follow the king's gambit. They moved in silence. Poirot, Japp, Lavinia, Arbuthnot, Sir Reginald, constables. The mirrors whispered, recorded voices layered. The circle has no centre, only masks. Find me in the heart, at the maze's heart, the crate. H. Poirot, urgent. It was 6 feet long, coffin-shaped, padlocked with a camellia-shaped hasp. A pocket watch was wired to the lid, 1:53 and counting down. Poirot knelt. 7 minutes, 7 minutes. He inserted the brass key from the camellia stem. The lock clicked. The lid creaked open. Inside, another Poirot. A perfect automaton, wax face, glass eyes, mechanical joints. Its right hand held a gramophone record. Its left clutched a camellia, injected with belladonna. A speaker in the chest crackled to life. Poirot's own voice. If you hear this, the circle has won. The bomb beneath the embankment detonates at 2 a.m., unless... The automaton's eyes lit red. It sat up with a whir. The camellia stem extended, needle gleaming. Japp fired. The bullet struck the automaton's shoulder. Wax splintered, gears screamed. It lunged, needle aimed at Poirot's throat. Poirot sidestepped, using his cane to parry. The needle grazed the automaton's own cheek, injecting belladonna into its wax flesh. The face began to melt, revealing brass beneath. Arbuthnot grabbed a mirror shard, slashing the automaton's arm. Gears spilled like entrails. Lavinia screamed as the camellia flew from its hand, landing at her feet. The needle pricked her ankle. She collapsed, eyes rolling back. Sir Reginald caught her. "Atropine! Harrow's kit!" Poirot tore open the crate's false bottom. Inside, a medical bag and a reel of nitrate film. He injected Lavinia with atropine. Her breathing steadied. The automaton slumped, voice distorting. "The circle has no end." It went dark. Poirot unspooled the film. A moving picture. The faceless man, alive, gauze gone, scars glistening, standing in the maze. He spoke directly to the lens. "You chase reflections, monsieur. The bomb is real. Beneath the embankment, tied to the tide gauge. At 2 Chias, the gauge reads 0. The circuit closes. London loses. A mile of riverfront. But the crate holds the key, literally." He held up a brass key, identical to the one in Poirot's hand. "One key arms the bomb. One disarms. Choose wisely." The film ended. Jap cursed. "2 keys? Which is which?" Poirot examined the automaton. In its chest cavity, a second key, wired to the speaker. He compared them under his magnifying glass. One key had a microscopic scratch. Harrow's mark. The other was pristine. "The scratched key is the decoy," Poirot said. "The circle trusts no one. The pristine key disarms." He turned to the maze wall. A panel slid aside at his touch, revealing a maintenance hatch. Beyond, the embankment's tide gauge, a brass wheel connected to cables disappearing into the riverbed. A red light pulsed, armed. He inserted the pristine key. The light turned green. The wheel spun backward. Disarmed. Silence, then a boom from the river, not the bomb. The tide gauge had triggered a counterweight. A section of the embankment collapsed, revealing a hidden chamber. Inside, the faceless man strapped to a chair alive, scars glistening under a single bulb. A gramophone beside him played La Vie en Rose on loop. He laughed. "A wet, broken sound. You chose correctly." But the game continues. Poirot entered. The survivors followed. The chamber was lined with mirrors, each reflecting the faceless man from a different angle. In every mirror, he wore a different mask. Poirot, Arbuthnot Valois, Harrow, Sir Reginald. The real man sat unmasked, a void. Jap raised his revolver. "It ends here." The faceless man smiled. "Somehow, though he had no mouth. Shoot! The bullet passes through gauze. The circle is idea." Poirot stepped between them. "Non, the circle is evidence." He produced the ledger, the film, the keys. "Scotland Yard will trace every account, every mask destroyed, every victim restored." He turned to the gramophone, lifted the needle. Silence. The faceless man's scars twitched. "You think you've won?" Poirot's voice was soft. "I think you've lost everything, even your war." He gestured to the mirrors. "Break them." The constables smashed the glass. Shards rained. Each broken mirror revealed a hidden compartment, passports, banknotes, surgical tools. The circle's empire, exposed. Arbuthnot kicked the faceless man's chair. It toppled. The man did not resist. Lavinia recovered, whispered, "Who is he?" Poirot knelt, lifting the man's wrist. Beneath the scars, a faded regimental tattoo, 11th Hussars, Colonel Arbuthnot's battalion, Mesopotamia, the gas attack that took his face, and his name. Arbuthnot staggered. "Lieutenant Grayson, I thought you died." The faceless man, Grayson, laughed until he coughed blood. "I did. The circle gave me purpose, to erase the world that erased me." 2:15 a.m. The tide peaked. Water lapped at the chamber's threshold but did not enter. The bomb disarmed. The embankment sealed. Police launches arrived, searchlights cutting the fog. Officers swarmed the chamber, cuffing Grayson. The mirrors were catalogued, the crate sealed as evidence. Poirot stood at the threshold, the last camellia in his hand. He crushed it. The petals fell like snow. Japp clapped his shoulder. It's over, old friend. Poirot's eyes were on the river. A single camellia floated past, white, unblooded, dry. It caught the searchlight, then vanished beneath Westminster Bridge. He murmured, "The circle has no end," until the last mask sinks. Chapter 7. The Heart of the Maze. The Thames had begun its slow retreat, leaving the Crimson Club a gutted husk, its scarlet facade streaked with river mud and broken glass. Searchlights from Scotland Yard launches stabbed the fog, turning the water into molten silver. Constables in oilskins swarmed the embankment, cordoning the mirror maze warehouse with yellow tape. Lieutenant Grayson, faceless, scarred, the circle's architect, was loaded into a Black Maria, wrists cuffed with steel that glinted like ice. His laughter had died. Only a wet cough remained. Hercule Poirot stood apart on the quay, coat collar turned up, the crushed camellia still in his fist. The petals were dry, impossible after the flood. He turned the stem. Inside the hollow glass tube, a second nitrate strip smaller than the first. He held it to a constable's torch. A single frame, the Tower of London at night, a crate on the foreshore, stamped H. Poirot. Final performance. Beneath the image, a time 3 a.m. Inspector Japp approached, boots squelching, Grayson's talking, names, accounts, surgeons in Vienna. The circle's finished. Poirot's eyes did not leave the river. No, the circle is a hydra. Cut one head, another speaks. He showed Japp the film. The final performance. We have 75 minutes. Lavinia Strathmore, wrapped in a constable's blanket, shivered beside Sir Reginald. The tower? Smugglers' tunnels run beneath the Traitor's Gate. The tide drops at 2:30, exposes the foreshore for an hour. Colonel Arbuthnot, face bruised but eyes sharp, added, "I know the route, served as aide-de-camp there in 19. There's a postern gate, rusted, but it opens." Poirot nodded. "Alors, we go." They moved in convoy. 2 police launches, sirens muted, cutting through the fog. Poirot, Japp, Arbuthnot, the Strathmores, and 4 armed constables. The tower loomed ahead, black against black, ravens silent on the battlements. The clock on the White Tower struck 2:15 as they tied up at Tower Wharf. The foreshore was a graveyard of river debris. Broken barrels, fish skeletons, camellia petals caught in the mud like white eyes. The tide had retreated, leaving a narrow causeway of slick stone. Arbuthnot led them to a rusted iron grate set into the wall beneath the bloody tower. He produced a key from his waistcoat. His own regimental key, never surrendered. The grate screeched open onto a tunnel that smelled of salt and centuries. Lanterns raised, they descended. The passage was narrow, walls weeping. Every 20 paces, a camellia was painted in phosphorescent pigment, glowing faintly, guiding the way. The floor sloped downward, then levelled into a circular chamber beneath the chapel, the heart of the maze. The chamber was vast, vaulted with Roman brick. In the centre, a stone plinth, and on it, the crate. H. Poirot. Final performance. It was smaller than the last, no larger than a violin case, bound with crimson silk ribbon. A camellia was pinned to the lid with a diamond stud, the same stud that had adorned Sir Reginald, Harrow, and the Faceless Man. Poirot approached. The plinth was carved with the circle symbol, a red ring enclosing a camellia. Beneath it, an inscription in Latin, Facies furtiva semper vincit. The stolen face always conquers. Japp whispered, "Trap? Naturellement." Poirot circled the plinth. No wires, no clock. Only a brass keyhole shaped like a camellia petal. He inserted the brass key from the camellia stem, the pristine one that had disarmed the embankment bomb. The lid clicked. Inside a mask, not wax, not latex. Living skin, pale, veined, breathing faintly. The face was Poirot's own, but the eyes were closed, lashes trembling. A tube ran from the mask's mouth to a glass vial filled with clear liquid. Belladonna solution, circulating, keeping the tissue alive. Lavinia gasped. "It's you." Poirot's hand did not tremble, but his voice was soft. "No, it is the circle's masterpiece. A graft, skin cultured from my blood, taken when I pricked my finger on the first camellia in the salon. They plan to wear me, speak with my voice, ruin me from within." Arbuthnot's face twisted. "Grayson! No, Grayson was the surgeon's knife. This—" Poirot lifted the mask. Beneath it, a gramophone record and a note in handwriting he did not recognize. Elegant, continental, play me at 3 goats. The heart reveals itself. The chamber's walls began to hum. Hidden gears ground. The plinth sank, revealing a spiral staircase descending further, into the bedrock. The air grew warmer, sulphurous. They descended. The staircase ended in a laboratory. Surgical lamps, steel tables, shelves of masks in jars, faces floating in formaldehyde, Arbuthnot's, Valois, Harrow's, Sir Reginald's, and dozens more. Politicians, bankers, a royal cousin, the Circle's gallery. In the centre, a man in a white coat, back turned, face hidden by a surgical mask. He was wiring a final mask to a contraption, a brass helmet lined with needles. The mask was Grayson's void, but the scars were fresh, raw. The man spoke without turning, voice muffled, but familiar. "Vous êtes en retard, Monsieur Poirot. You are late." Poirot's cane tapped the floor. "Dr. Harrow, but you died in the cellar." The man turned. The surgical mask fell away. Dr. Felix Harrow, alive, eyes bright with belladonna mania. His throat was unmarked. The corpse in the cellar had been another double. Harrow smiled. "The Circle has many bodies. Grayson was the face. I am the mind." Japp raised his revolver. "You're under arrest." Harrow pressed a button. Steel doors slammed shut. Gas hissed from Vaunt's chlorine, the scent of Mesopotamia. Arbuthnot coughed, eyes streaming. Lavinia collapsed. Sir Reginald clutched his throat. Poirot held his breath, tearing a strip from his cape to cover his mouth. He lunged at Harrow, cane striking the doctor's wrist. The brass helmet fell, needles scattering. Harrow laughed, producing a scalpel. "You cannot stop progress. The Circle perfects humanity, one face at a time." They fought. Scalpel flashed. Poirot parried with his cane, the ferrule unscrewing to reveal a hidden blade. He slashed Harrow's coat, revealing the red circle tattoo, freshly cut. Harrow was the final member. Japp, gasping, fired through the gas. The bullet struck Harrow's shoulder. The doctor staggered, dropping the scalpel. Poirot tackled him, pinning him to the surgical table. "The antidote," Poirot demanded. "Atropine, where?" Harrow spat blood. "Too late. The gas kills in 5 minutes." Poirot's eyes swept the lab. A ventilation lever, marked with a camellia. He pulled it. Fans whirred. The gas cleared. The survivors coughed, revived. Arbuthnot bound Harrow with surgical tape. Lavinia found atropine, injecting herself and the others. 2:45 a.m. Poirot turned to the brass helmet. Inside, a speaker and a final record. He placed it on the gramophone. Harrow's voice, calm, recorded hours ago. "If you hear this, the Circle ends with me, but the heart beats on. The final mask is not worn. It watches. Look up." They looked. Above the lab, a two-way mirror. Behind it, a silhouette. The true mastermind. Featureless, cloaked in crimson. It raised a hand. Poirot's gesture. Then vanished. The mirror shattered outward. A camellia fell, landing at Poirot's feet. Dry, white, breathing. 2:50 a.m. Harrow laughed until he choked. "You'll never catch the heart. It has no face." Poirot crushed the camellia under his heel. "Then we destroy the maze." He opened the furnace, used to sterilize tools. He tossed in the masks, the records, the ledger. Flames roared. The lab filled with the stench of burning flesh and wax. Harrow screamed as his empire melted. "The circle has no end," Poirot finished, "until we give it one." 2:55 a.m. They climbed the spiral staircase. The chamber above was collapsing. Stone dust rained. The crate was gone, taken by the silhouette. Only the ribbon remained, fluttering in the draught. They emerged onto the foreshore at 2:59. The tide was rising again, lapping at their boots. The tower clock struck 3 guests. A launch waited, not police. A figure in crimson stood at the helm, face hidden by a porcelain mask. Poirot's own. It raised the crate. H. Poirot. Final performance. The mask's eyes were holes, but they watched. The launch pulled away, vanishing into the fog. Japp fired. Too late. Poirot stood motionless, river wind whipping his cape. The heart escapes, but the maze burns. Behind them, the tunnel collapsed with a roar. The Crimson Circle's laboratory was entombed forever. Dawn was still hours away. The survivors stood on the foreshore, masks gone, faces raw. The war orphans would receive $500,000. The Circle's victims would be identified. Grayson and Harrow would hang. But the crate was gone. The final mask breathed. Poirot looked at the river. A single camellia floated past, white, dry, alive. It caught the searchlight, then sank beneath the surface. He murmured, "À la prochaine, mon frère," until the next performance. Chapter 8. The Abyss of Reflections. The Thames at 3:05 a.m. was a black mirror, fog curling across its surface like cigarette smoke in a darkened room. The Tower of London loomed behind them, its ravens finally stirring with harsh, indignant cries. The collapse of the smugglers' tunnel had sealed the Crimson Circle's laboratory forever, but the cost was etched on every face. Lavinia Strathmore's gown hung in tatters. Sir Reginald's eyes were hollow with shock. Colonel Arbuthnot's knuckles bled from the fight, and Inspector Japp's revolver steamed in the cold. Hercule Poirot alone stood untouched by the river's chaos. Though the last camellia, white, dry, alive, rested in his breast pocket like a heartbeat not his own. A police launch idled at the wharf, its searchlight cutting a white path through the murk. The crimson-masked silhouette, the true mastermind, had vanished downstream in a stolen vessel. The crate H. Poirot, final performance cradled like a child. The camellia's nitrate frame had shown Greenwich as the destination. 4:00 a.m., 55 minutes, Japp barked orders. "All units to Greenwich reach. Block the river!" His voice cracked with exhaustion, but the yard responded. Sirens wailed from Blackfriars to the Isle of Dogs. Poirot's gaze followed the current. No, the river is a distraction. The crate is bait. The heart lies elsewhere. He produced the nitrate strip from the camellia stem, holding it to the launcher's lamp. The frame had changed, burned in by chemical reaction. Now it showed a map, a clinic in Vienna, Clinic St. Camellia, ringed in red. Beneath, coordinates and a time, midnight, December 31st, 2 months away. Arbuthnot spat blood. Vienna. We're chasing ghosts across Europe. Précisément, Poirot said. The Circle plays a long game. The crate is a message. We must intercept it before it leaves the Thames. He turned to the launch pilot. Greenwich Pier. Vita. They cast off. The launch sliced through the water, engine roaring. The fog thickened, swallowing the city. London's lights became smears of gold and crimson. The camellia in Poirot's pocket pulsed, a faint warmth, like a living thing. 3:15 a.m. Greenwich Pier emerged from the mist, its iron railings draped with riverweed. A barge, the Crimson Dawn, was moored at the far end, its deck lit by a single crimson lantern. The crate sat in the centre, lid ajar. The porcelain mask, Poirot's face, lay beside it, cracked but breathing, the lips moving in silent monologue. Japp raised his revolver. "Armed police! Step away from the crate!" No answer. The barge was empty. Poirot boarded, cane, tapping the deck. The crate's interior was lined with velvet, stained with belladonna. The living mask was gone, taken. Only a gramophone record remained, labelled "Play Me, Final Performance." He cranked the handle. A voice, his own but younger, accented with Walloon French, crackled forth, "Frère Hercule, you chase reflections. The circle began in our mother's womb. I am the twin you never knew. Vienna awaits. Bring the camellia, or London burns on New Year's Eve." The record ended with a click. The barge's lantern exploded, plunging them into darkness. 3:20 a.m. Emergency lamps flared. The deck was empty, but the crate's velvet lining bore a fresh imprint, a child's hand. Poirot's blood ran cold. Mon Dieu, the circle breeds its heirs. Arbuthnot cursed. A child, Grayson's, non. Poirot lifted the imprint with talcum. The fingers were too delicate. A girl, 7, perhaps 8, the twins' insurance. Japp radioed the yard. "Seal the river, search every barge, every pier." But the fog was a living thing, swallowing sound. Poirot knelt, examining the cracked mask. The porcelain was warm. He peeled back a shard. Beneath, skin grafted to the ceramic, veins pulsing. The mask had been alive, sustained by the belladonna in the crate. A single camellia petal clung to the inner surface, inscribed with microscopic writing, "Abyssus abyssum invocat." "Abyss calls to abyss." Lavinia whispered, "What does it mean?" "That the heart has depths we have not plumbed." Poirot stood. The barge is a decoy. The twin travels by land. The clinic in Vienna is the destination, but the child is the key. 3:25 a.m. A constable shouted from the pier, "Sir!" Footprints, small, bare feet, leading to the old Naval College. They followed. The prints were fresh, pressed into the mud, each toe perfect. They ended at a manhole cover beneath the Queen's house. Arbuthnot pried it open. A ladder descended into the Greenwich Foot Tunnel, a Victorian marvel tiled in white ceramic, lit by flickering gas lamps. The air was cold, damp, echoing. Poirot led the descent. The tunnel stretched 1,200 feet under the Thames, a perfect cylinder of silence. Their footsteps rang like gunshots. Halfway across, the lights died. Darkness swallowed them. Japp's lantern flared. In its beam, the child. A girl, no older than 8, dressed in a crimson smock, face hidden by a miniature Poirot mask, porcelain, breathing. She held the living mask from the crate, now attached to her own face, the skin fusing at the edges. Her eyes, Poirot's eyes, stared through the holes. She spoke, voice a child's but with the twins' cadence. "Frère, you are late." Poirot's canne trembled. "Ma petite, you are not the heart. You are its prisoner." The girl raised a hand. The tunnel walls rippled, mirrors hidden behind the tiles sliding aside. The abyss of reflections opened, infinite Poirots, infinite children, infinite masks. The girl stepped backward, vanishing into the maze. 3:30 a.m. They followed. The mirror maze was a nightmare of recursion. Every reflection showed a different horror. Poirot strangling the child wearing his face, the twin laughing from 1,000 throats. The air grew hot, sulphurous. The tunnel's floor sloped downward into an undocumented chamber beneath the riverbed, the abyss. The chamber was a perfect sphere, walls lined with mirrors, floor a pool of black water reflecting the ceiling's crimson bulbs. In the center, a surgical throne, and on it, the twin. He was Poirot's mirror image, but taller, gaunt, eyes burning with belladonna. His face was unmarked, but his hands were scarred, the surgeon's hands. The child stood beside him, mask now fully fused, her own face erased beneath. The twin smiled. Hercule. At last, Poirot's voice was steel. You are the heart, the circle's founder, my twin. The twin bowed. Etienne Poirot. Separated at birth, sold to the clinic. They made me perfect. You, they discarded. Japp raised his revolver. Step away from the child. Etienne laughed. Shoot. The mirrors are bulletproof. The child is the bomb. He gestured to the girl's chest. Beneath the smock, wires, a ticking device, 3:35 and counting. Lavinia sobbed. She's just a child. She is the future, Etienne said. Her face will be the first of many. The circle will wear the world. 3:36 a.m. Poirot stepped forward. The mirrors reflected his every move, but he focused on the child. Ma petite, what is your name? The girl's voice was small. They took it. Poirot knelt, eye level with the mask. Then I give you one. Camille, like the flower. He reached into his pocket, producing the last camellia, white, dry, alive. He pressed it to the mask's lips. The porcelain cracked. The living skin peeled away, revealing the child's face, pale, frightened, but human. The girl gasped. The wires sparked. Etienne lunged, scalpel flashing. Arbuthnot tackled him. The two men fell into the black water, struggling. Sir Reginald grabbed the child, pulling her from the throne. The bomb ticked. 3:38. Poirot tore at the wires. Red to disarm, he muttered, remembering Harrow's diagram. He cut the red wire. The ticking stopped. 3:39 a.m. The mirrors shattered outward. Hidden doors opened, constables poured in. Japp had radioed coordinates. Etienne was cuffed, screaming in Walloon. The child, Camille, clung to Lavinia, mask discarded, face her own again. Poirot stood over his twin. Frère, the abyss reflects only what we bring to it. Etienne spat. The circle lives in Vienna. Non. Poirot produced the clinic's map, tearing it in half. The circle ends tonight. 3:45 a.m. They climbed back through the tunnel. The gas lamps flickered on, revealing the maze's wreckage. Mirrors in shards, reflections dead. The Thames above was calm, the fog lifting. Dawn's first light touched the water. On the pier, Camille held Poirot's hand. Will they hurt me? Poirot knelt. Never again. You will have a name, a face, a life. Japp approached, radio crackling. Vienna police raided the clinic. Found nothing but camellias. Poirot smiled. The heart is here. He placed the torn map in Camille's hand. Burn it. She did, the flames consuming the last of the circle. The survivors stood in silence as the sun rose, painting the Thames gold. The camellia in Poirot's pocket was gone, wilted, dead, ordinary. But in the water, a single petal floated, white, wet, sinking. Chapter 9. The Final Mask. Dawn bled across the Thames, turning the river from ink to molten copper. The Greenwich Foot Tunnel's entrance gaped like a wound, shards of mirror glittering in the mud. Police launches ringed the pier, their searchlights dimming as the sun rose. The Crimson Circle's empire, its masks, its ledger, its laboratory, was ash and rubble. Dr. Felix Harrow, Lieutenant Grayson, and Etienne Poirot, Hercules' twin, were in custody, bound for the Old Bailey. The child Camille stood on the quay wrapped in Lavinia Strathmore's blanket, her small hand clutching the torn map of Clinic St. Camellia. The flames that consumed it had died, leaving only a curl of smoke and the faint scent of camellia. Hercule Poirot stood apart, coat unbuttoned, the wilted camellia from his pocket now a dry husk in his palm. The petal that had floated on the water was gone, sunk or carried by the current. He crushed the husk. Dust scattered on the wind. Inspector Japp approached, hat in hand, face etched with fatigue. It's over, Poirot. The yard's tearing Vienna apart. The clinic's a shell, camellias in every room, but no staff, no records. The circle's dead. Poirot's eyes were on the horizon, where the Thames met the sea. Non, mon ami, the circle is a virus. It mutates. Camille's blood, he turned to the child. Ma petite, they took something from you. Camille nodded, eyes wide. They pricked my finger, said it was for the flowers. Lavinia knelt, brushing hair from the girl's face. They cultured the masks from her stem cells. Living tissue, the formulas in her blood. Sir Reginald, voice hoarse, added, they planned to sell it. Faces for the highest bidder, kings, criminals, anyone who wanted to vanish or become someone else. Colonel Arbuthnot, bandaged but steady, growled, we burn the girl's blood, destroy the source. Camille flinched. Poirot's hand rested on her shoulder. No, we do not destroy innocence, we protect it. He turned to Jap. The clinic's emptiness is a lure. The true source is mobile. A laboratory on water, a barge, a ship. The final camellia blooms at midnight, December 31st. We have 2 months. Jap's radio crackled. Sir, report from Vienna. Camellias delivered to the Belgian embassy. White, dry, alive. 1 for every diplomat. Notes inside. Wear me at midnight or Brussels burns. Poirot's moustache twitched. The circle's last performance. A global stage. 2:20 a.m. shifted to planning. The launch carried them back to Scotland Yard, where a war room was assembled. Maps, telegrams, photographs of the melted masks. Poirot stood at the centre, cane tapping the floor like a metronome. The twin, Etienne, spoke of a clinic ship. The Crimson Dawn was a decoy. The real vessel is larger, disguised as a hospital ship. Red Cross markings, neutral waters. It sails for Ostend tonight, then Vienna by rail. He pinned a photograph to the board. A white ship, SS Camellia, docked at Tilbury. We intercept at sea. Arbuthnot objected. The channel's patrolled. They'll see us coming. Précisément, Poirot said. We do not come as police. We come as patients. The plan formed. Poirot, Jap, Arbuthnot and Camille, disguised as a family seeking treatment for her rare condition. Lavinia and Sir Reginald would remain in London, coordinating with Interpol. The SS Camellia's manifest listed a Dr. Valois, Madame Valois, alive, escaped in the flood. 2:45 a.m., they boarded a yard cutter slicing through the estuary to Tilbury docks. The SS Camellia loomed, pristine crimson funnels, Red Cross flags limp in the fog. Crew in white uniforms moved with surgical precision. Poirot's party, Monsieur Poirot, wife, brother-in-law, niece, presented forged papers. A steward with a camellia in his lapel led them aboard. The ship's interior was a floating clinic, corridors of white tile, camellias in crystal vases, the air laced with belladonna. Patients in wheelchairs wore porcelain masks, blank faces, waiting for grafts. Poirot's party was assigned a suite on the upper deck. Camille clung to his hand, whispering, "They smell like the maze." 3:15 a.m. The ship sailed, engines thrummed. London faded. Poirot locked the suite, examining the camellia vase. Each flower had a hollow stem. Syringes. He pocketed one. Jap, in a borrowed dressing gown, muttered, "Valois is here." Saw her shadow in the corridor. Poirot nodded. She is the lure. The twin is the trap. He produced the wilted camellia husk, crushing it further. A microfilm fell out. Coordinates, Fifinacon N, 2 Decorti, mid-channel. Midnight, December 31st, 3:30 a.m. They explored. The ship's operating theatre was a cathedral of steel and glass, masks in rows like choir boys. Madame Valois stood at the centre, crimson gown, camellia behind her ear. She smiled. "Monsieur Poirot, you are predictable." Arbuthnot raised a hidden pistol. Where's the twin? Valois laughed. Everywhere. The ship is the circle. The patients are the masks. She gestured to a tank. Camille's blood, gallons of it, cultured in vats. The final bloom. At midnight, the masks awaken. The world wears new faces. Poirot stepped forward. And Camille? Valois' eyes softened. The heart. Her blood is the key. She dies at midnight or the formula is lost. Camille wimmeled. Poirot shielded her. You will not touch her. Valois pressed a button. Steel doors slammed. Gas hissed. Belladonna vapor. Arbuthnot fired, shattering a vat. Blood sprayed, viscous and warm. Jap tackled Valois, cuffing her. Poirot grabbed Camille, running. 3:45 a.m. Corridors twisted like the mirror maze. Patients rose, masks breathing, eyes opening. The ship was alive. Poirot's cane blade flashed, cutting through porcelain. They reached the deck. Fog thick, sea black. The ship's horn sounded, midnight approaching. A figure emerged from the fog. Etienne, unmasked, face identical to Poirot's, but scarred at the temples. He held a camellia, alive, blooming. Frere, the final performance. Join me or die. Poirot faced his twin. You stole my life. I reclaim it. They fought. Cane versus scalpel. Fog swirled. Arbuthnot and Jap held off the masked patients. Camille screamed as Etienne slashed Poirot's arm. Blood mixed with belladonna. Vision blurred. Poirot fell to one knee. Etienne raised the camellia, its stem a detonator. The ship explodes at midnight. The formula floods the sea. The circle lives forever. Camille ran forward, grabbing the camellia. No! She bit the stem. Belladonna flooded her mouth. She spat it out, crushing the flower. The detonator sparked, failed. Etienne roared, lunging for the child. Poirot rose, cane piercing his twin's shoulder. Etienne fell, blood pooling. You cannot stop. Poirot whispered, I already have. He signalled the cutter, waiting in the fog. Royal Navy boarders swarmed the ship, rifles blazing. The masked patients collapsed, porcelain cracking. Valois was dragged away, screaming. 11:59 p.m., December 31st. The ship was secured. The vats were drained into the sea. Camille's blood, harmless now. The formula died with the tide. Poirot stood on the deck, Camille in his arms. The fog lifted. Stars pierced the sky. Etienne cuffed, glared from the rail. The circle has no end, Poirot finished, until we choose one. He tossed the last camellia overboard. It sank, petals closing. The ship docked at Ostende at dawn. Camille was placed with a Belgian family, her blood tested, clean. The clinic in Vienna was raised. The circle's accounts were seized, funds to orphans. Poirot stood on the pier, alone. Jap approached. You're free to go, old friend. Poirot smiled. No, the performance continues. Somewhere, a camellia blooms. He boarded a train for Brussels. In his pocket, a single petal, white, dry, waiting. Chapter 10. The Empty Chair. The train from Ostende to Brussels rattled through a January dawn so pale it seemed bleached of colour. Frost feathered the windows. The fields beyond were white and silent, as though the world held its breath. Hercule Poirot sat alone in a first-class compartment, overcoat folded neatly on the rack. The single camellia petal, white, dry, waiting, resting in a silver cigarette case on the table before him. The case was closed, yet he could feel the petal's pulse, faint as a moth against glass. He had not slept. The events of the SS Camellia played behind his eyes like a kinetoscope. Etienne's identical face twisted in rage. Madame Valois' crimson gown soaked in blood. The child Camille's small hand crushing the detonator flower. The vats of cultured skin draining into the black channel. The circle's empire was shattered. Its leaders in chains, its fortune seized, its masks melted. Yet the petal remained, a seed. The conductor knocked. Monsieur, Bruxelles midi dans 20 minutes. Poirot inclined his head. Merci. He opened the case. The petal had changed. A vein of crimson now threaded its edge, as though it had drunk the night. He lifted it with tweezers. Beneath, a microdot no larger than a pinhead. He held it to the window's light. Coordinates 50.8476 degrees N, 4.3572 degrees E, and a time midnight, January 1st, the Grand Place, the heart of Brussels. Poirot's moustache curled with the ghost of a smile. Alors, the final performance begins anew. 2:50 a.m., the train hissed into Bruxelles midi. The platform was near deserted, only a porter pushing a brass luggage cart and a woman in a crimson cloak, face hidden by a porcelain half-mask painted with Poirot's own features. She raised a gloved hand. In it, a camellia blooming, its petals edged in frost. Poirot stepped down. The woman melted into the crowd before he could follow. On the cart, a note pinned beneath a luggage tag. The empty chair waits. Café Le Cercle, Grand Place. He pocketed the note. The petal in the case was now fully crimson. 3:15 a.m., a taxi carried him through Brussels' sleeping streets, past the atomium's dark spheres, the mannequin peas frozen in midstream, the Bourse's neoclassical facade. The Grand Place emerged like a stage set. Guild halls gilded even in moonlight, cobblestones gleaming with frost. Café Le Cercle occupied a corner, its windows steamed, a single chair pulled out from a table, empty. Poirot entered. The café was warm, smelling of coffee and spéculoos. A gramophone played La Vie en Rose, Valois voice, recorded, looped. The patrons were few, an old man nursing a demi, a couple whispering, a waiter polishing glasses. All wore subtle camellia pins. The empty chair faced a mirror. In it, Poirot saw himself, but the reflection smiled first. He sat. The waiter placed a café noir and a camellia before him. The flower's stem held a key, brass, camellia-shaped. The waiter whispered, "Sous la table." Poirot reached beneath. A panel slid aside. Inside, a leather folio. He opened it. Photographs. Camille, older now, in a Vienna orphanage. A letter in Etienne's hand. The girl lives. The formula evolves. Midnight, the chairs fill. 3:30 a.m. The gramophone skipped. Valois' voice distorted. Je vois la mort en rose. The patron rose as one, masks lifting, blank porcelain. They moved toward Poirot, hands outstretched. He stood, cane unsheathing its blade. Asseyez-vous. The performance is mine. The patrons froze. The waiter dropped his tray, crash. In the mirror, the reflection Poirot raised a revolver. The real Poirot had none. The reflection spoke. Etienne's voice. Frère, you are early. The mirror rippled. Etienne stepped through, unchanged by prison, crimson suit, face identical, eyes burning. Behind him, Camille, now 10, eyes wide, a camellia crown in her hair. She held a vial, her blood glowing. Etienne smiled. The circle never died. Bloomed. Camille is the garden. Her blood perfects the masks, self-sustaining, eternal. Poirot's blade steadied. You escaped. Illusion. The man in chains was a double. The real heart walks free. Etienne gestured. The patrons removed their masks. Faces of world leaders, celebrities, Poirot himself. The world wears us now. Camille whispered. They made me grow the flowers. I didn't want to. Poirot's heart twisted. Ma petite, you are free. Etienne laughed. She is the future. At midnight, the formula releases, airborne. Brussels sleeps, wakes wearing new faces. Then Europe, then the world. 3:45 a.m. The café's clock struck the quarter. The patrons advanced. Poirot backed toward the door. Camille broke free, running to him. Etienne lunged, scalpel flashing. Poirot parried, cane clanging against steel. They fought through the tables, coffee spilled, porcelain shattered. Camille grabbed the vial, smashing it on the floor. Glowing blood hissed, evaporating. Etienne roared, "You destroy everything! Non, I destroy you!" Poirot's blade found Etienne's wrist. The scalpel fell. Blood, Poirot's own blood, spattered the cobblestones. The patrons froze, masks cracking. The formula was gone. 3:50 a.m. Brussels police, tipped by Jap from London, burst in. Etienne was cuffed, screaming in Walloon. The patrons were unmasked. Actors, hired for the night. The real circle had fled. Camille clung to Poirot. "Is it over?" He knelt, wiping blood from her cheek. "Oui, the garden is safe." Outside, the Grand Place was filling with revellers. New Year's Eve, hours away. Fireworks tested the sky. Poirot led Camille to a waiting car. Interpol, arranged by Lavinia. She would live in Switzerland, anonymous, protected. Etienne, in the Black Maria, laughed through the bars. "The petal lives, frère." Poirot closed the door. The car pulled away. 4:40 a.m. Poirot stood alone in the square. The empty chair was gone. In its place, a single camellia, white, wet, ordinary. He picked it up, no microdot, no pulse, just a flower. He tucked it into his buttonhole. The cafe's mirror reflected him, alone, smiling. Jap's voice crackled over a portable radio. "Poirot! The Vienna clinic! Camellia's withered overnight, the formula's dead, Camille's blood is clean." Poirot murmured, "The circle has no end, until the gardener chooses." He walked into the dawn. Brussels stirred, bakers lighting ovens, street sweepers clearing confetti. The camellia in his lapel wilted, petals falling like snow. At the station, a final telegram waited. From Camille. "Thank you, Uncle Hercule. I have a name now." Poirot boarded the train for Paris. The petal dust in his case was gone, blown away by the wind. The empty chair remained in his mind, but the performance was over.